isn't. I mean, there's hardly anybody in our floor, hardly anyone who's interested.
We are back.
The other floors, I can't say that, but our floor because we're the district office. Yeah, most of us are working remotely. So, and then we've been staggering the days. So, I might be there today and tomorrow. Orlando will be there, and then Nathan will be there the next day. So, staggered. Okay. And we've been vaccinated, so although they still wear a mask, while we're there. I mean, they changed the rules. They say if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear your mask. I have to wear my mask.
I wouldn't pay attention to them. I'd wear my mask.
I would not. Exactly.
Because they're telling you with this variant that you need to wear a mask. And when I go to LA, when I go to LA next week in another week, we have to wear a mask indoors. Like, so I've not gotten the shots yet, but it's like, really, just wear the mask and be done with it. Because you can still transmit the virus. You can still get it. It's like if they just go on and say that, but they're so busy trying to convince everybody to get the shots. If they would just tell people, then they wouldn't be confused. I'm tired of that.
Yeah, people are confused. They're thinking, what was it? There was one. He was on the news too. I think he was the mayor of one of the cities here in Illinois. They were talking about opening up the city and such and such, and he says, "Oh yeah, when I heard that you didn't have to wear your mask." Oh no, what he said was, when I heard that you couldn't get it or give it after you've been vaccinated, I thought to myself,
no one ever said that. Well, somebody might have said that, but that's not. You can give it, and you can get it.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought to myself, oh, he's so wrong.
Well, he's been given, but a lot of bad information has been passed.
Oh my God, I thought he's so wrong. Talk about misinformation.
Okay. Do we have Reverend up?
I'm dialing her right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
On WCPT 820.
Hi, I'm
a lot of my friends, people that I know, are still wearing their masks. They're not.
Child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart.
We have Reverend Johnson now.
Okay. You know what? Let's go up. And we're up now?
We're up. Yeah.
Okay. So how are we sounding? Okay. Reverend Johnson, could we hear you, please?
Brought to you by
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, great.
Good morning, Reverend.
Okay, so I'm going to let you go, Marnie, and Maria. I was about to call you Medi.
No, that's okay.
We'll let you go now.
Have a great show.
Thanks so much.
Have a great show, guys.
Governor Ron DeSantis says they're not going to stop searching for the
How you doing,
condo building
Pastor
collapse.
Vicky?
He describes himself as
I am doing well, Sandy. What about you?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Let me say hello to Carol and Barbara Jean and Samantha Banks, Linda, Andre, Philip.
Possible bad weather ahead.
Sending you all much love today. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to be talking about reparations. Can you bring the radio station down for me, Paul? Thank you. I appreciate it. We're going to be talking about reparations. Bob Johnson, the nation's first Black billionaire, said he wants his reparations check and he wants it now. And so that begs the question to me, what does reparations, what should it look like? What should it look like? I think there's a lot of discussion about that. Should it be an individual payment or should it be an institutional indemnification? That is to say, do we need to get a check cut to us individually? How can you really be paid for your ancestors' sweat and toil? Or should monies go to Black colleges, establishing those land grant schools that were established after slavery? Should we get our banks back? Because we've lost so many of our Black banks and businesses. Should we establish those funds? I mean, Black people were driven out of, there were many Tulsas, Pastor Vicky. We all, when you step back anecdotally, we all have family stories about why we ended up in Chicago or New York or Detroit or Minneapolis, because we were run out of the South. To show you how tied we are to the South, Black people going back to the South. because we're Southern in culture. And so everybody there, we're going to be talking about that. And Ida B. Wells, the statue, is going to be unveiled today. We're going to have her great granddaughter, Michelle Duster, my classmate from Whitney Young. She will be on talking about that. And Dr. Shanina Knighton wants to talk to you about T cells today. T cells. That's right. We oftentimes hear talk about T cells, Pastor Vicki, in relationship to HIV and AIDS. But you need to have a high T cell count to fight off anything, including COVID. And she's going to talk to us about that today. So got a lot in the hopper for you today. I hope you thank you. You said the sound is clear. Thank you so much, Philip. Hey, Linear Bob out there in San Jose. Mark, how are you all doing? Give my love to my sweet Lorraine, Shirley Carter from fabulous, beautiful Philadelphia. Ashley King, hello from Memphis. You know I love Memphis, girl. I got some of my best friends down there. And Carol, and so many of you. I'm so glad that you're here this morning. You know, I reached over and did something, Vicki, and I pulled out my back. Oh, oh my gosh. It's like I have no range of motion. Or very, it's very, very limited. So I'm like, oh, what did I just do? Ooh. Oh, I was lucky to get my
You're the
eyelashes
second
on.
person. Yeah, you're the second person that I heard in the past 12 hours that did the same thing. Thank God that you're not down like the other young lady. She reached and pulled her back out, and
Yeah.
now she's confined to bed.
Oh yeah. No, I scooted on over here. But boy, oh boy, does it hurt. Like, okay, well, I'm going to try and do something to try and get it together. But, you know, we're going to keep on going because that is just, it is just, it is what it is. So, Paul, we're good
Yes.
today. And if you could just let me know as soon as you can that you have someone up.
Okay.
Okay, just as soon as you can. That way I can know whether they are there or not and know how to pace myself in the show. So, everybody, you know, I'm so glad to be with you today. Hey, Francis. And people from Memphis. Oh, do you remember when we used to go down to Memphis? We had so much fun, Vicky. Oh my gosh.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, we had fun. Whew.
So much fun.
Now you all had a
Were
lot
you
of fun
old
because
enough to listen? Were you old enough to have fun?
well, I was having my fun. You all were teenagers. You all having another because we were at the swing. And that was great. That was big fun for us. Now, I mean,
Yes.
what else could I do at 10? Come on. Y'all were having fun. That's why the push choir had the matrons, who you all could not stand. You know, that, and they sat in the class and yeah. And looking back,
in the same uniform. In the same uniform.
y'all I didn't even know you were fun. Now I understand. We're going back. Oh, you're making me go all the way back. That is so hilarious. They had those
They were
matrons
the
sitting
wardens.
sitting right on top of you.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Oh boy. God bless you, everybody. We're about to get on with the show.
15.
Oh my goodness. Oh boy.
5. This is the Santita Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Welcome to Teeter Jack. Coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today on Hump Day. That's right, Wednesday, June 30th, 2021, on the cusp of July 4th weekend. Ooh, it's going to be exciting, everybody. The fireworks. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. I want you to call me or text me at 773 763 WCPT, 773 763 9278. If you text me, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to do that. But I want to hear your voices today. 773-763-9278. And you can meet my morning stars over on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. That's right, Santita Jackson and Friends, and on WCPT's page as well. You can meet me on Instagram at Santita Jackson IG and at Twitter at Santita J. Please, everybody, like and subscribe to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe and let's spread the word. Everybody, all my morning stars, please. Philip, Francis, Linear Bob, everybody like and share. Jarvis, Janae, Carol, who was up first today, Barbara Jean, Samantha, Linda, Andre. Please like and share, like and share. Ashley came from down there in Memphis. We were just reminiscing, Ashley. Hope you heard it. We had a good time on South Parkway. That's right. Oh boy, oh boy. Got a lot to talk about today. What should reparations look like? The nation's first billionaire, first black billionaire, Bob Johnson, who, along with his former wife, created BET. Thanks to Mayor Marion Barry, who had this open channel in Washington, D.C., and he decided to give the rights to Bob Johnson. That having been said, it made him a billionaire, made his former wife a billionaire. And now he said, you know what, I want my reparations and I want my check now. So my question for you is, what should reparations look like? We're going to be talking about that today. And of course, Ida B. Wells' statue is going to be unveiled today. She is the first Black woman to have that kind of honor. Here in Chicago, we're going to have her great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, on to talk about that. It's going to be unveiled in Bronzeville. It's very, very exciting and historic. And of course, Dr. Shanina Knighton is going to be talking to us about T cells. Oftentimes we hear discussion about T cells in relation to AIDS and HIV. No, 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 no. Everybody needs to have a solid T cell count. And there's some foods that can help you to boost it. And there's some foods and behaviors that can kill it. So we're going to talk about that. Of course, we've got Reverend Vicki Johnson giving us some good news. So let us get to some of these headlines today on the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. It's going to be a showery, it's just raining all throughout this part of the country. Chicago will have a high of 78 degrees, scattered thunderstorms, everybody. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 88 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 9 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 27 points. The S&P 500 held steady, went up about 1 point. And the Twins versus the White Sox. We're having a great time. The White Sox were triumphant yesterday, 7-6. They'll be playing a game today, weather permitting. And the Cubs faced off against the Brewers. The Brewers were triumphant 2-1, and they'll be facing off against one another today. The Hawks, well, they were triumphant over the Bucks, 110-88. As President Biden heads down to Surfside, Florida, to comfort that community in the wake of this tragedy at the Champlain Towers. People are wondering. Many experts are warning that the Florida Tower disaster is a climate emergency wake-up call, according to this report from Common Dreams. And the search for answers, Brett Wilkins writes, following last year's disintegration, everybody, of a high-rise condominium tower near Miami, Surfside, some experts are cautiously pointing to the climate emergency as a possible culprit, or at least the very least a multiplier in the disaster, underscoring the need for urgent climate and infrastructure action. 12 deaths, 149 people still missing following this partial collapse. People are wondering about what happened. Why did they have a deteriorating roof, defective waterproofing, crumbling concrete columns, and rusting rebar in the building's underground garage? It's more than the pool, everybody. In fact, they are on salinated salt water. What happened? Many people are trying to figure that out. And why wasn't there an engineer on their board? Why didn't they have an architect formally on their condominium board? It's something for all of us to think about. For those of us who live in condominiums, I don't care where we are. But President Biden and the First Lady will be traveling there today to meet with officials and mourning families who've waited nearly a week. Many people are saying that he is the comforter in chief because of the tragedy that he has had to overcome and withstand in his life. Congressional Democrats received a boost on Tuesday when Joe Manchin, senator from West Virginia, said he supports moving ahead with a wide-ranging infrastructure bill via budget reconciliation. That's big, everybody. However, Manchin also gave hope to the Republicans. telling MSNBC's Stephanie Rule that any Democratic-only package should not be linked to the bipartisan Group of 21 blueprint that was agreed to last week, everybody. What is going on in the Northwest? This deadly heat wave. More than 230 deaths have been reported in British Columbia since Friday amid the historic heat gripping the Pacific Northwest. That's a huge increase over the typical 4-day period. And authorities are working to figure out how many of the deaths are heat related. Indeed, in Portland, Oregon, uh, they had to discontinue their public transportation because their grid is about to fail. We have to think about that and wonder what is going on out there and continue to pray for our brothers and sisters in the Pacific Northwest, above and below the border. A major policing law overhaul is in jeopardy as lawmakers and law enforcement groups remain divided over what the wide ranging legislation should look like. Last week, bipartisan negotiators for the bill said they'd reached an agreement on its general framework, but the hot button issue of qualified immunity, protections given to police officers in civil court, remains unresolved. Big news yesterday. The House voted to remove statues of Confederate leaders from the U.S. Capitol. As many of you know, the Capitol, you might not know, the Capitol, U.S. Capitol, is full of statues of Confederate leaders, Confederate heroes. They are honored on our U.S. Capitol. Those many people consider to be traitors. They certainly did fight against the Union. The House on Tuesday passed legislation to remove statues of Confederate leaders from the U.S. Capitol and replace the bust of Roger B. Taney, the U.S. Chief Justice who wrote the 1857 Supreme Court decision that said people of African descent, black people, are not U.S. citizens. The vote was 285 to 120, with 67 Republicans joining Democrats in backing the measure. A similar bill passed the House last year on a 305 to 113 vote, but did not advance in the Senate, then controlled by the Republicans. Upon reintroducing the bill this year, of South Carolina pointed to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, during which some supporters of the president, Donald Trump, carried Confederate flags, everybody. On a narrow vote, the Supreme Court has left the CDC ban on evictions in place. The New York City mayoral race, well, it is in disarray, everybody. The Board of Elections hurled the city's first ever ranked choice mayoral race into disarray by releasing updated results showing Eric Adams' lead in the contest shrinking drastically, only to withdraw those tabulations hours later due to an embarrassing error, everybody. Well, it turns out under the new tally, Garcia uh, Catherine Garcia had soared to second place, 48.9%, trailing Adams by just 15,908 votes, which spelled potential trouble for him. But hours after releasing this information, the Board of Elections deleted the tabulations from its website because it said it had forgotten to remove 135,000 test ballots from its system before running the count. Wow, they're working it out right now, everybody. And it's a GOP mega donor who is funding South Dakota's troops' borders. They're sending the National Guard from South Dakota to the U.S. Mexico border. Interesting. Let me go to you. I need some good news. We go up, we go down. We go up, we go down. Pastor Vicki Johnson, pastor of the St. Thomas Lutheran Church here in Chicago, and you all are worshiping in person, outdoors in your courtyard, but in person at 8,000 Jeffrey Boulevard from 11:45 to 12:15 on Sundays, everybody. So you don't want to miss that. Give us some good news, Pastor Vicki.
Well, good morning, Santita, friends and stars. It's time for good news. We've had some pretty stormy weather here in Chicago and in the Midwest for the past couple of weeks. Internet and cable has been disturbed, property flooding, branches and twigs have been strewn all around. Large trees have even split and landed on cars parked on the streets. From the outside, the trees look perfectly fine, but upon further investigation, one could see where it was rotting on the inside with the potential to do damage. And so it is with us. We do everything we can to look good on the outside. Ladies, we have the right outfits. Gotta have the right shoes. Gotta have the right shoes. Our nails are in place. Our makeup. Gotta have the right makeup and makeup removal. Um, Everything has to be just so. Gentlemen, gym shoes, the jeans, the suit, haircuts, beard trims, locks being touched up, all to look good on the outside. And I must say, we do look good. But what's going on the inside? What are you putting on the inside? I'm talking about your spirit, which is not visible to the human eye. What are you doing to make yourself whole and complete on the inside? Do you read and study the Bible, self-help books, or other inspirational material? Do you pray, meditate, think, or chant, to be inclusive of our siblings who have various ways of relating to the Creator or to Earth itself? Do you rest and relax? I like looking good on the outside, but it is so important to stay in tune with what's going on the inside to avoid the potential for damage. Take care of yourself inside out. And if you can do this, to me, that's good news.
Amen. You have inspired me today. Pastor Vicki Johnson, St. Thomas Lutheran Church here in Chicago. And guess what, everybody? You don't want to miss her today. She is, on Sunday. They are worshiping in person, but they're outside in the courtyard, 8,000 Jeffrey Boulevard, 1145 to 1215. Just 30 minutes of power. That's all you need. It's going to be fabulous.
That's right.
Love it. Not the hour power, but the half hour power. I ain't mad at you. Love it.
Right.
Oh, Pastor Vicki Johnson, sending you much love. We've got Dr. Shanina Knighton with us today. She's the resident scholar at Case Western Reserve University, registered nurse. She is an infection preventionist, one of the few in the United States. There are very few in the world, quite frankly, relatively speaking. When you think that we've got close to 7 billion people, there are only a few thousand in the United States, and we've got more than 330 million people in the United States. Today, you said you wanted to look at T cells. Now, when we hear discussion about T cells, Dr. Knighton, oftentimes it is in relationship to HIV and AIDS. And you said, wait a minute, we need to broaden that a bit.
Yes. So T cells are important because they can boost our immune system or they can help destroy our immune system. And so when we think about something down to the cellular level, we never think about how it affects our body, right? So early on in the pandemic, they did a study and they showed that individuals that had an overabundance of good T cells were less likely to get COVID. So when someone says, well, why is it that some people have good T cells and others don't? I tell them that the key is what are you doing to help your T cells or destroy your T cells? And a lot of that can be changed through our lifestyle habits, particularly diet.
It's interesting.
When we talk,
What is a T cell? Well, before you get into what is that? Because I know when I go to the doctor, I never ask about my T cell count. What is a healthy T cell count? What is a T cell?
okay, so T cells are a part of the immune system that focus on specific foreign particles. So we got our body where we have our normal cells, and our cells are supposed to be doing what they're supposed to do to protect us. But then when we have foreign cells, like COVID-19 can be considered a killer T cell that comes into our body, right? It is something that is dangerous to our body. So the T cells focus on what's bad for our body. So rather than our T cells, like let's say, protecting our body, how can I put this? This is so interesting, like trying to explain it. Okay, so T cells are part of our immune system that focus on targeting like foreign particles. So like that's just like saying, you know, everybody in the family is getting along great, everything is healthy, and then you get that one bad apple that comes to the bunch. Well, the T cells will focus on that bad apple of making sure that it can neutralize or get rid of that bad apple. So essentially what it is the vaccines are intended to do to get rid of COVID-19 or to neutralize COVID-19 from being so severe or causing death. Your body has T cells that are part of your immune system that play a critical part in attacking things that are foreign to make sure that they don't hurt you. And so with our body, T cells can kill, you know, the virus, infected cells that are in your body for COVID-19. They also help your body to prevent disease and end infection. So it is very important for our body to have healthy T cells, if that makes sense.
What's a good
So
T
when
cell
we're
count?
talking about I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, I'm sorry. What's a good T cell count to have?
Okay, and are you asking this like just in case somebody like goes to the doctor and
Oh,
asks?
oh yeah.
So it should be somewhere between 500 and 1,600 T cells per cubic millimeter of blood.
Ooh.
And so ways that you can increase that or make sure that it stays between that range. Of course, the goal is to be on the higher end of that range. Things that can help strengthen your immune system would include not smoking, which we already know that even something like COVID-19 attacks your lungs. So it's a respiratory infectious disease. You want to eat a diet that's high in fruits and vegetables. You want to exercise regularly. You want to maintain a healthy weight. If you drink alcohol, then you should only do it in moderation. Many people don't know this, but alcohol actually not only just lowers the immune system, but it also lowers your metabolism. You want to get adequate sleep, and you want to take physical steps to avoid infections, such as washing your hands frequently and making sure that you're like even cooking meat thoroughly. So the goal is to do all of these things, which should be in your toolbox, to make sure that you are having a good T cell count. Now, when someone says, oh, boost your immune system, or what are ways that you can boost your immune system, you rarely hear someone say, oh, boost your T cell count. They're just saying boost your immune system. And so that's oftentimes why we don't hear about foods that boost the T cells, because it's always, oh, what are some foods that can boost your immune system? Well, it's interesting because those foods that can boost your immune system are still the same ones that essentially boost the T cells. So they're almost talking about the same thing when they talk about T cells. So we're talking about, you know, like your citrus fruits. We're talking about, you know, red bell peppers, broccoli. So I'm giving you a couple, but there's so many. Garlic, ginger. Ginger is actually one of my favorites, and that's something that I try to incorporate in my diet every week. When you're talking about lettuce and you don't have a particular preference for lettuce, simply eating spinach can help with that. Almonds. So there are a lot of things that you can do, and I'm sure people may have been hearing about turmeric lately. So we have foods out there that can do the job, but we also have to be conscious in that there are also foods that can destroy your T cell. And we don't think about that in the matter of, okay, I'm eating this and this is going to hurt me. But essentially, that is the food additives and the preservatives that can weaken your immune system. Added sugar weakens your immune system. Fried food can weaken your immune system. Fast food can weaken your immune system because it has so many preservatives and is highly processed. Highly refined carbs, foods that are high in food colors. So all of these things can do the reverse and can actually revert. They can hurt your immune system.
Everybody, did you know that? We're going to be talking about that on the other side of the break for a few minutes. Before we bring on Michelle Duster, the great granddaughter of Ida B. Wells, as they unveil this statue, the first time in the history of Chicago, that a black woman has been honored in such a way. How did she end up in Chicago anyway? Well, she was chased out of Memphis. Just as Dr. King had to leave Alabama. Wow, wow, wow. We're talking about your T cells, the things that you need to be asking your physician when you go see your physician. You need to ask about your T cell count. Oftentimes we hear, Dr. Knighton, when we talk about T cells, we're thinking about HIV and AIDS. You said, no, 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 no. You need to know your T cell count, and it needs to be high so that you can fight whatever comes your way. It's not just COVID that's out here, everybody. A lot of stuff is out here. A lot, a lot, a lot. Call me, text me, 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Text me. Thank you, GWCNC lawyers, but I want to hear from you. I want to hear your voices. How healthy are you? How healthy are we? The Santita Jackson Show. Going to be talking about reparations today, too. Can't wait to hear your voice. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Oh, Marcus, don't worry about my back. Girl, I pulled my back out this morning.
Oh,
Oh,
that's never good.
I reached over and I said, uh-oh, uh-oh. So my range of motion is not what it ought to be. But, things happen. What are you going to do? Thank you, Mark. I will be all right. Trust and believe. We're going to work it out. However I can work it out. I was thinking about a friend of mine who I'm going to call him today. He practices Eastern medicine. And so I'm going to call him just before we have our high school reunion. Help me. Just help, help, help. Oh my gosh. But thank you for this because it's this is something we don't think about. My friends um, who have who have AIDS or who are HIV positive, they're always keeping track of their T cell count. And I with them because one of my friends who actually had AIDS, he's still living, thank God. He came to me to tell me that that's what he had and that he had a. I said, well, so what's your T cell count? Just with my limited knowledge, and it was 2. And I said, stay right there. Don't leave your physician. And he stayed with me. I had him stay with me overnight because I took him over to see this Eastern medicine specialist who was in my complex when I lived in New York. Now he's asymptomatic. I mean, his T cell count is very. Oh yeah. This woman she was Dr. Courtney Witherspoon. Just absolutely, she is a gift. Her. And I went to her when I had a really bad allergy season. She just was just great. But I can tell you, when you talked about the T cell count, I said we're going to do that today. So we're going to be wrapping everything up at 39 after the hour. So you keep an eye on your watch there, okay? So you can go into the foods and we can continue this tomorrow because I just this is a real. What did you say? Linda Smith Hall says that the Black Health Network needs to hear from Dr. Knighton. They have a weekly Zoom on Sunday. That's right. That's Dr. Walks, and that's an organization in which he's very active. So Linda, I'll reach out to him because she has so much practical information, but she is an infection preventionist. What is that? I've got about 30 seconds, Dr. Knighton. What is an infection preventionist?
So an infection preventionist is an individual, and it's interesting because I was telling someone that there are typically about 16,000 of us in the world. But our role, like we have a discipline that is concerned with preventing healthcare associated infections. It's practical rather than theoretical, meaning that we are doing all things to make sure that we are preventing infections. So that may be studying how infections move, studying where they go, studying methods of preventing and controlling the spread of infectious diseases. And so an example of that would be, for example, making someone aware that cell phones have germs on it that are 10 times dirtier than a toilet seat, and advising them that a logical practice may be to clean it twice a day in order to be able to prevent some of those germs.
Whew. Okay. I think there's a lot
Coming back in 15.
And you'll get Ms. Duster up?
Yes, I have her now on
Okay,
hold.
perfect. And we'll bring her up. She'll be wrapping up at 6:39.
Okay.
Dr. Knighton will. And we'll bring Michelle Duster up just right after that. Thank you so much.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station based here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, my family up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And, of course, my morning stars over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody, please like and share. Everybody, Janae, L. Stanley Davis, Linda, Jacqueline, Ty, Barbara, Monique, everybody, like and share. Stay right here, but like and share. And please go on over to the Santita Jackson Show on YouTube, that channel, and like and subscribe. And everybody, please, friend me on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and Santita Jackson IG, that's on Instagram, and at Santita J. Everybody, like me, share with me, be my friend on Twitter. We've been talking with Dr. Shanina Knighton, one of the few infection preventionists in the world. It's hard to believe that there are about 16,000 of you in the world, with about 7 billion people. And we have a lot of infections that we need to prevent, just with my limited knowledge of your profession. But you've been talking about the T cell counts. And with these few minutes that we have left, we have about 5 minutes left. What do you want us to know? What should we be eating? What should we be avoiding?
Got it. And before we even get into that really quick, I just want to make sure people understand T cells just really briefly again. Just understanding that they are a type of white blood cell. So whenever we go to the doctor and they say, oh, your white blood cell count is high or low, T cells play a very important role when we're talking about your immune system. There are multiple types of T cells, but I want people to realize that our body has a crazy amount of them in our body. I'm talking about 25 million. So about 25 million to a billion different T cells in our body, believe it or not. And when we look at a T cell count, when we talk about what's healthy, we're talking about 500 to 1,600 T cells per cubic millimeter of blood, okay? And it's not the of the actual numbers. It's just to help you understand that we have a lot of them in our body. T cells are like our soldiers who search out and destroy anything that's targeting that's set to invade our body. And so when someone says, okay, well, wow, how does my T cells become compromised? Infections are things that predispose you to infections, lower your immune system, such as foods, lifestyle habits. They actually increase your risk of being able to get infected. Having a chronic disease can limit or can lower your ability to protect yourself. That's why diabetes is one of the toughest ones, and it's associated with COVID, because we're talking about the ability for sugar to not be regulated. Well, we know that eating high sugary foods can lower your immune system. And so, of course, if your endocrine system is not regulating your sugar good enough for someone that will have diabetes, then that's why they're more prone to infection. So I was telling our audience, make sure that ways to strengthen your immune system would be to don't smoke. If you do smoke, then try to figure out how to limit it or eliminate. I was going to say limit it or eliminate it. Mm-hmm. Making sure that you're eating a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables. When we're talking about diet that's high in fruits and vegetables, be careful in terms of canned items that may have high fructose corn syrup and other ingredients that can lower your immune system. When we're talking about vitamins, because people may say, oh, well, I take vitamins, and these vitamins, help my immune system. They may help your immune system, but one of the things that many people don't think about, there are harmful ingredients that can be inside of vitamins. So while you may take vitamin C or vitamin D, maltodextrin is an added ingredient that while you are getting nice and boosted in your immune system, you can have the maltodextrin sitting there that can help you to gain weight. Mm-hmm. So we have to think about food differently when we're saying what's healthy and what's not, and making sure that we're thinking about it on a granular level, meaning what am I eating? I'm eating this piece of fruit, or I'm eating this canned fruit, because I understand that not everyone has access to fresh fruit. Mm-hmm. Making sure, is it made of normal liquid, meaning does it come in the actual fruit juices itself with a preservative such as ascorbic acid, or am I consuming something that has food coloring, has high fructose corn syrup in it, has added sugar? So we have to start thinking about our foods in a natural form, as well as understanding that there are things that we can do to make sure that we are in our most healthiest state, so that way we can stay ready instead of having to get ready should we encounter another pandemic or should your body encounter an infection.
Dr. Shanita Knighton, everybody, infection preventionist, resident scholar at Case Western University, registered nurse. Boy, oh boy, the first in her family to get out of high school, college. Boy, oh boy, are we glad for her witness and her testimony, because she brings this information to you. She's with us every day, and we love Dr. Shanita Knighton, one of my favorite people in the world. Just brilliant scholar and practitioner. Dr. Knighton, can't wait to be with you in the morning.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to it. And, bring the questions, everyone, because that's what we're here for.
Absolutely. Bring them on. And, stay right here. We've got someone who's made a little history here, her great-grandmother. I went to high school with Michelle Duster, and she would talk about Ida B. Wells. Of course, I knew who Ida B. Wells was, the famed journalist, this woman of God who tracked the pain and the possibilities and the powers of our people. She was one of the few people willing to go and find out how we were being treated. She was one of the few people who was willing to go and report on lynchings. On lynchings, you have to remember, when Rosa Parks was the state secretary of the NAACP, it was against state law that she did so. So you can imagine what Ida B. Wells, what she was up against. In fact, she settled in Memphis, and then she was chased out of Memphis, as freedom fighters are. But we are honoring her in Chicago. Indeed, she will be the first Black woman to have a statue dedicated to her. And I welcome you to the show again, my dear sister friend, as we are about to have our anniversary for Whitney Young. Michelle Duster, the great-granddaughter, brilliant author, lecturer, professor in her own right, always so smart. I just love you and admire you so much. And you have been working so hard, you and your family. And now Richard Hunt, my goodness, this historic artist, sculptor, he's created this tribute to your great-grandmother. Welcome to the show. Welcome back, should I say.
Oh, thanks for having me, Santita.
Welcome back. Whew, it's been years, years that you crowdfunded, years to build this sculpture. Let me ask you this: why is it in Bronzeville? Why not downtown?
Well, it was very important for this monument to be in Bronzeville because, first of all, my great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, lived in Bronzeville for over 35 years. Secondly, the Ida B. Wells homes that were named after her stood very prominently in Bronzeville for over 60 years. And then Bronzeville itself is such a historic neighborhood that it's important, to recognize that history and for the history of Bronzeville to be in Bronzeville.
And Richard Hunt. Why Richard Hunt? This world-renowned sculptor, this African-American who's one of the most prominent artists, living artists in the world today.
Absolutely. And all of those reasons are exactly why we chose him, in addition to him being a native Chicagoan who understands the history and knows the neighborhood, knows the culture. And we just thought he could bring all of his life experience as well as obviously his artistic talent to this project and be able to interpret it in a way that nobody else could.
Why and what is he bringing to it? Because it's not going to be a statue per se of Mrs. Wells. I mean, please help me with that.
No, it is not a statue. It is a monument, which means that it's a piece of artwork. It's a sculpture that is interpretive and abstract. And we decided, we were very deliberate, we meaning I'm on a committee, the Ida B. Wells Commemorative Art Committee, and we felt that my great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, was so multidimensional and so multifaceted that we wanted to have something created that would be that. And it would allow people to interpret for themselves who Ida was and what she meant to them. And so we could capture all of who she was, all multifaceted aspects of her. There are images and text on the monument, so people will be able to see what she looks like.
So what are we going to see when we see this multifaceted woman? Why don't we step back and see who she was? I mean, because like so many Chicagoans, she comes out of Mississippi and she was born into slavery. Interestingly enough. Please speak about your great-grandmother.
Right. So my great-grandmother was born into slavery in 1862 in Holly Springs, Mississippi, which, hopefully that helps people understand that slavery was not that long ago, because I'm 3 generations away. And so she grew up during Reconstruction because the Civil War ended when she was 3 years old. So she came of age during Reconstruction, eventually moved to Memphis, where she started her career as a teacher and eventually segued into journalism and civil rights. She became a civil rights activist and really dedicated the rest of her life to chronicling lynching, the realities of lynching that were rampant during her time. And she also got involved in the suffrage movement. And here in Chicago, she got involved in social work, where she created a housing facility for Southern migrants. So she did so many different things during her lifetime. And with the sculpture, this monument, we capture all of that. And the hope is that people will learn about her, but also see part of themselves in her and be inspired by what one person's voice can do.
What do you think? Do you think is she misunderstood, or is she as fully understood as she ought to be?
Well, I've been working for over 3 decades, as you know, to help people remember my great-grandmother, Ida B. Wells, because I think she, as well as so many other women, have not received the due that they deserve. We are so underrepresented, and our stories are so undertold. And so I think that's part of it. The fact that this is the first monument in Chicago to an African-American woman in 2021, says a lot. And so we have a long way to go in our country to recognize and celebrate the contributions of women.
Do you think we understand the fight that she had in the suffragist movement? Can you talk about that a bit?
Right. Well, people need to remember that, women did not gain the right to vote until technically 1920 when the 19th Amendment was passed. And then for black women, it wasn't until 1965 for many black women. And so she spent most of her life without having the right to vote. She was 58 years old when women gained the right to vote. And so she was in that fight to gain first-class citizenship, to be able to participate in our democracy.
I mean, but it's surprising that she was almost 60 years of age before she had the legal right to vote. Um, that's stunning, and it's stunning to hear you say, Michelle Duster, because in fact this applies to so many of us. You're only 3 generations removed from slavery. I mean, my father often says, he reminds us, we have been, we were in slavery longer than we have been free. And so this freedom experience is very, very new to African Americans. That's why, we're going to be talking about reparations at the top of the show, at the top of the hour. What should reparations look like? Because we're just coming around to even understanding our freedom fighters like Ida B. Wells, everybody. A monument to her is going to be unveiled in Bronzeville today, weather permitting. Well, what are we going to do about the weather, Michelle?
Well, we're going to have the ceremony, rain or shine.
Okay.
But we just decided to move everything indoors. It will be streamed on Facebook Live on the Ida B. Wells Monument page. So the ceremony will be accessible to everybody around the world as long as they have the internet. So that unfortunately we won't be able to do the outdoor part, but we'll still do the indoor part and dedicate the monument to the city of Chicago.
Well, maybe we'll be having other events at the monument going forward, because of course we're living through this really, really tumultuous weather moment, if you will. It's hot as Hades in the Pacific Northwest and now in the East, and it's raining in the middle of the country. I mean, this is unbelievable. Just every day we're getting thunderstorms. You know what? I think that there's a lot of talk about intersectionality, about us working together, and because we're in this moment of reckoning, if you will. Um, can you talk a bit about the fight that the fight that your great grandmother had as a black person, as a woman, and as a black woman? I mean, because she had to work with Susan B. Anthony, she had to work with Jane Addams. I mean, but when they have the big suffragette march, they're asked to stand in the back. Can you speak to some of that? I mean, because that's something that I think that we can all, white, black, brown, yellow, and red, as women, I think we need to understand her story, and so that we can relate to her even more fully and really appreciate her accomplishments.
Right. Well, I mean, she, as a woman, did not have the right to vote until she was in her late 50s. As a black person, she did not have the right to vote either. I mean, so either way, she did not have that right to vote. And so she was involved with the fight to gain the right to vote. Some white women, there were suffrage organizations which were mostly segregated. So white women and black women worked separately from each other, mostly because black women were not welcome in most suffrage organizations that were dominated by white women. My great-grandmother here in Chicago was a little bit of an exception. She did work with white women in the city of Chicago. And when they she founded the Alpha Suffrage Club, which was an all-black suffrage organization. But she traveled to Washington, D.C. with an Illinois delegation that was predominantly white. And once they got there to march in the parade together under the Illinois banner, the organizers of the march asked the black women to march in the back of the parade. And luckily, she did not comply with that, and she inserted herself into the parade front and center in the Illinois delegation.
That's unbelievable, unbelievable. We're talking with Michelle Duster, the great granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. That's right. She has written a book, everybody. I hope you do get it. We've talked about it before on this show. Ida B. the Queen. The Extraordinary Life and Legacy of Ida B. Wells. It is a fantastic book, and it really, you cover the waterfront in this book, Michelle Duster, because you talk about not only who she has been historically, you talk about how she resonates into our lives today. Because when we look at our politics today, we're really in the Ida B. Wells tradition, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that. Um, what do you want young people to get from this monument? I mean, do you plan to have tours? Are there going to be, how can we find out more about her? Because I think we're going to have to teach our own children our own history. And this is a history, everybody. Michelle, I believe that belongs to all of us. This is Black history. It's women's history. It's American history. It's people's history. What should be our takeaway? Because as we watch these young people getting out and they're being active, um, I don't know if they know how much you have to put on the line. I mean, like, for example, how did she end up in Chicago? I mean, she didn't just come here out of Memphis.
Right. Well, she actually came to Chicago. Well, first of all, she was run out of Memphis because she was writing. She was a writer and owned a newspaper, the Memphis Free Speech, and three of her friends were lynched. And she wrote about that. That's what started her on her journey to becoming an investigative journalist that is now historical. As far because she wrote about lynching, she investigated lynching, and she chronicled it, and is what is called data journalism, where she wrote names, dates, locations, and the circumstances around lynching. And because she was so forceful, and she encouraged people in Memphis to boycott white-owned businesses and the streetcars and to leave Memphis where they could not get justice, she was considered so disruptive and dangerous that her life was threatened. She went to New York initially, and she ultimately ended up in Chicago at the request of Frederick Douglass, who wanted her to help with the boycott of the World's Fair in 1893. And so that's how she ended up in Chicago. And they co-wrote a pamphlet that chronicled the African-American experience in the United States to help people understand how we were treated as second-class citizens, but also what our contributions were to this country.
What do you think, as we look at Bronzeville today, you have to tell you, it breaks my heart to see the Ida B. Wells homes no longer there, because it's like wiping out a whole history. A lot of great people. It was a wonderful neighborhood. It was a wonderful community, the Ida B. Wells community. Public housing, absolutely, but it was people's housing for many Black people, for Black people, particularly of that particular era. Uh, that was a step up. I think my father's first home with his parents was in public housing in Greenville, South Carolina. They ended up naming the housing uh, complex after him. But this is where he said, number one, we had indoor plumbing, and it was a community. It was a community. Um, and will this monument help us to kind of stir up memories of this community that's being gentrified, Michelle Duster? Um, she might be the most prominent.
I was involved.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, I've been involved in several projects that are in Bronzeville, and a couple of years ago, I worked with Alderwoman Sophia King to have a historical marker placed at 37th and King Drive that commemorates the Ida B. Wells homes and will encapsulate that history for exactly what you said. I want people to remember that there was an entire community on that land. So there's two different things. There's the historical marker on 37th and King Drive that's dedicated to the homes. And then this monument is more about Ida herself, which is at 37th and Langley.
Everybody, get on over there. Where is the monument going to be placed?
It's at 37th and Langley. And people can watch the dedication ceremony at 9:30 a.m. today on Facebook Live at the Ida B. Wells Monument page.
This is so exciting. I am so proud of you. Yeah, and I have to tell you I'm proud because we were at Whitney Young High School together. We're classmates. And she used to talk about her great grandmother. Of course, I knew who her great grandmother was. I've always had so much admiration for her. And I am so glad that you have continued to hold up the banner so that we can really get to know this great woman of our history. You've got to get the book, everybody. Ida B. the Queen. She is indeed that. The extraordinary life and legacy of Ida B. Wells. And what an extraordinary life it is. And in this final minute, I've got about 60 seconds. Is there anything left unsaid, Michelle?
Well, I mean, hopefully people will watch the Facebook Live ceremony, but also this monument is here to stay, and it's for the people. This was created as a result of support from thousands of people from all across the country. So the way I look at this monument, it is a monument of the people, for the people. And, you know, my hope is that
1 minute.
the community, the city, the nation will use this monument, use this space as a sacred space to reflect on who Ida was, but also see themselves and be inspired by what they can do. So people can have all kinds of programming and activities at the monument in deference to who she was and what we all can be.
Well, you need to go on and get Ida B. the Queen, the extraordinary life and legacy
30.
of Ida B. Wells, so you can see this fabulous Black Gibson girl on the cover of this book. I love it, girl. Love it. Every day at 9:30 on Facebook Live, you can see the unveiling of this monument, 37th and Langley here in Chicago, to Ida B. Wells, the great Ida B. Wells. We owe her such a tremendous debt of gratitude.
5.
Much love to you, Michelle Duster, and to your family. Reparations coming up. What should they look like?
Absolutely.
Back in just a minute.
Thank you so much.
Oh, love you, Michelle. Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, it's at 37th and Langley.
Mm-hmm.
And the Facebook page
It's
is...
Ida B. Wells Monument.
Okay. All right, I'll keep announcing it.
Okay.
Okay. And if there's anything else I can do, please let me know.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, the monument is up and it'll be up forever. So, you know, I've been on this committee to get the monument created.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole separate thing to have programming. And I feel that this is part, we will dedicate this monument to the city. Mm-hmm. So it belongs to Chicago. And I encourage people to create, activities and events as using the monument as a location and a backdrop. So if you want to encourage people to do that, I mean, I'm thinking there could be poetry readings and yoga classes and, you know, as well as walking tours and all kinds of activities that will use that space as a source of inspiration.
Well, you know, you are more than welcome to come back and let's talk about that. Okay? I mean, really, because I want to do that. And whatever we can do for you or whatever we can do with you, we'll certainly do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Whatever it is that we
Sounds
can
great.
do. Whatever it is that we can do. Because I can just remember back in the day, you've been holding up this banner for the longest time, and you should have. And I'm so glad that you have. I'm so glad that you have. And I'm so, my love and congratulations go to your family and to all of us, because we really do need, we need to embrace this wonderful history and this wonderful legacy that your great grandmother left to us. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Santita. And thank you for all you're doing. I mean, you're holding up the banner too, girl.
Girl, whew. You are so sweet. Oh, are you going to the end?
I don't think I'll be able to make that, unfortunately.
I'm trying.
We have Attorney Patillo.
I'm trying. I don't know if I'm going to be here. Oh, hold on a minute. You know what? Let me grab this. I'm about to run into another segment. Oh, boy. Love you, Michelle.
Okay, no problem. All right. Thanks for having me, Santita. Love you too.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Give my love to your family.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Hey, honey, what's going on? Are you going to be able to be with us or no? Oh, okay. I'll call you. Paul? Ooh. Hello, hello, hello. Hey, everybody.
We have Mike Green.
Hey, and you can call Jonathan Jackson as well, okay?
Okay.
Robert Patillo, Mike Green.
Good morning.
How are you?
Morning. I'm well. How are you?
Oh, boy. I am doing well. I pulled my back out this morning. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, no.
I'm like,
Get yourself one of those massage guns.
okay, what is that now?
I'll send you an Amazon link. I threw my shoulder out a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I thought I was gonna have to cut it off, but the little massaging gun that athletes use, it's amazing.
Yeah, because I was looking, I wanted something that was very pointed and focused, that could get like right up under,
Yeah.
because I was like, do they make anything like that? I mean, something that,
They do indeed.
And we have Mr. Jackson.
oh gosh, I need it. Oh, I am like, oh boy, and not feeling my best today, but we're working it out. God is good. Mike Green, how are you?
Teamwork is great work.
Oh, I need it. Oh gosh, Jonathan.
Hey, Santita, I'm gonna pull over in just a minute.
He is out taking care of his health. Mike Green,
Yes, I'm here.
staying cool, bless your heart.
We have air conditioning in Oregon.
Wait.
Good point.
You- Man, because I mean, when you hear about those temperatures, it's like 121 degrees. What in British Columbia? What? Like what? This is awful.
And we still have climate change deniers.
Oh gosh, that is so crazy. I mean, well, they've come up with a lot of reasons for it, but I'm like, this is a lot. I mean, and please, honey, I'm going to be swimming through Chicago in a minute.
Well, we saw our first fire yesterday, so
Really?
we're on pins and needles.
and hot coals too. Bless your heart.
And hot coals. Mike, I want to say it's a pleasure to meet you. My sister insisted I be on with you today.
Well, because he is
Likewise.
because he is brilliant, and Robert Patillo brilliant, but of course, Mike Green is going to set the table for us. He does such brilliant work in this particular space, and we need to talk about what reparations are supposed to look like. Everybody, what is the plan? What is the plan? Do you just need a check, or do we need something more, everybody? So let's talk about this today on the Santita Jackson Show. Okay, we're about to come up in 1 minute. We're on Facebook Live, everybody. Everybody on Facebook Live, please like and share, like and share, like and share. Um, that's right. Jonathan is biking today, and he pulled over because that's when I told him about the segment and who I had gotten for the segment. He said, "Oh, I'll pull over." He said, "Because this I want to hear, this I want to participate in." So there you guys go. We're very, very excited today to have you all so that we can talk about this. So important to have this discussion about reparations. What should they look like? I want to know what you think, everybody. I want to hear your voices. 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Thank you, Sheila. You say excellent information. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope you all will be supportive of this Ida B. Wells monument, everybody.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Wednesday, June 30th, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT, here in Chicago, America. And we're growing every day, thanks to you and your support. And AM 950 Radio, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Please meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. We're also streaming on the WCPT 820 Facebook page. Meet me on Instagram, Santita Jackson IG, and Twitter, at Santita J, and of course, my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show channel. And thanks to you, please like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. It's growing every day. Thank you for your support. We want to talk about reparations, what they should look like. And as we get into this conversation today, let us get to some of these headlines so we can hear this exciting panel work this out for us today. Uh, Searching for answers in the Florida condominium disaster in Surfside, Florida. In search for the answers last week following the disintegration of this high-rise condominium tower near Miami, some experts are cautiously pointing to the climate emergency as a possible culprit. 12 confirmed deaths, 149 people still missing. They had a deteriorating roof, defective waterproofing, crumbling concrete columns, rusting rebar, and salinated water from the ocean. What is going on, everybody? Well, President Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden will be down there today just to give some condolences because we're still, of course, looking for answers. They're going to be meeting with officials and mourning families as we try to find out what's going on. Congressional Democrats received a boost yesterday when Senator Joe Manchin, under pressure, I would say, a lot of protests, everybody. He said that he supports moving ahead with a wide-ranging infrastructure bill via budget reconciliation. That is, they won't need Republican support. However, Manchin also gave hope to Republicans, telling MSNBC's Stephanie Rule that any Democratic-only package should not be linked to the bipartisan Group of 21 blueprint that was agreed to last week. The Northwest heat is turning deadly. Everybody is turning deadly. Please be careful out there. More than 230 deaths have been reported in British Columbia alone since Friday. Historic heat wave gripping the Pacific Northwest from Canada straight down through the west coast of the United States. In the U.S. Northwest, at least 60 deaths have been reported and attributed to this new heat wave. The House of Representatives has voted to remove statues of Confederate leaders from the U.S. Capitol, everybody. They voted 285 to 120, with 67 Republicans joining Democrats in backing the measure. A similar bill passed the House last year on a 305 to 113 vote, but did not advance in the Senate, then controlled by the Republicans, which brings us here, everybody. Chicago, we're going to have a high of 78 degrees, scattered thunderstorms. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 88 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed up 9 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 27 points. S&P 500 closed up a point. The Twins, well, they fell to the White Sox yesterday, 7-6. They'll be playing a game for redemption today. The Cubs, well, they fell to the Brewers 2-1. They too will be playing for redemption today. The Hawks 110, the Bucks 88. Everybody, what about reparations? What about reparations? Uh, it's like the order of the day. Everybody wants to talk about it. The racial disparity, the McKinsey group has said that Black Americans have reduced Black life expectancy and left more than 3 million Black families in the U.S. have a negative net worth, warns a new McKinsey report. It's a fantastic report and very, very thorough. America's first Black billionaire, someone who doesn't need any money personally. Well, Robert Johnson, the founder of BET, and we have BET because of Marion Barry. Mayor Marion Barry of Washington, D.C. had access to a cable channel. And he said, I want to give it to a Black person. They need that. And he chose Robert Johnson. And so he founded BET, and it's become this cultural behemoth, if you will. And he's now America's first Black billionaire, along with his former wife, Sheila Johnson. And he wants his reparations check from the government, and he wants it to come with an apology for slavery, Jim Crow, and hundreds of years of racism. Now, he doesn't need any money. He said, but I need an apology and I need a check. He doubts that the check will ever come, but he sees a new kind of reparations happening already. The new reparations, he says, is critical race theory education. It's the housing grant program in Evanston, Illinois, and on and on and on. But what do you think? What do you think reparations ought to look like? We've got Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push, Attorney Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. He has his own radio show on WAOK in Atlanta, Georgia, every Sunday. I encourage you to listen. It's fantastic. From 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. And Mike Green, brilliant economist, uh, National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, a group that he founded, and brilliant economist. Well, let me go right to you, Mike Green. Please set the table for us. Reparations, what are they? Do we need them? And what should they look like?
Okay, that's a tall order. I'll see if I can meet the challenge.
I think you can.
Let's start with this idea, and I hate to be controversial, but I'm going to have to be this morning. I don't believe that a majority of white people in this country are evil. I'm going to say that again. I don't believe a majority of white people in this country are evil. That being said, a majority, an overwhelming majority of white people in 2000, at the turn of the century, were against reparations. Only 4% supported reparations in 2000. As of this past spring, a poll by Washington Post ABC came out and said that nearly 30% of white people now support reparations or some sort of reparations. Now, we're not even getting into specifics. We're just talking about the idea of reparations. And let me put a finer point on that. What we're really talking about are systemic human rights abuses targeting Black American descendants of slaves. That's what we're really talking about, systemic human rights abuses. Now, if less than 30% of white America are interested in redress for systemic human rights abuses targeting people here in this country, particularly Black American descendants of slaves, I have to conclude one of two things. Either a majority of white Americans are evil or a majority of white Americans are ignorant. I choose the latter. I think that of the majority of white Americans in this country not only do not know their own history, they don't know the history of hostility, they don't know the history of systemic human rights abuses targeting Black people in this country and all other communities of color. They don't know because the education system has been corrupted. Their education system has been conditioning their minds generation after generation to be more and more ignorant, isolated within a bubble of ignorance and privilege. And so when these issues come up, some of them who have stuck their head outside of the bubble of ignorance and can hear the pleas, can hear the protests, can see with their own eyes the challenges that Black people have been crying about for generations, those people react. They have a reaction. And that's good. So I don't believe that a majority of white people are evil. I do believe a majority of white people are ignorant. And so these kinds of conversations are necessary. The problem is that it's not happening in a vacuum. There are those who are on the other side seeking to confuse, to distract, to dilute, to create chaos within these conversations so there's not clarity. When there's clarity, it's hard for people, if they are moral people, it is hard for people to say, well, there's no reason for reparations. Now, that being said, let's look at what we're talking about. Back in 1865, when 4 million newly freed Black people walked off the last plantations in Galveston, Texas, on Juneteenth, Freedom Day, Jubilee Day. When that happened, the white Congress members, they had a problem. Their problem was no different than the problem it was when they first started the country. When they first started the country, they started the country with 8 slave states and 5 free states. Why? Because the question that they had to ask themselves, every state joining the Union had to ask the same question: what are we going to do with these Black people? Some said slave, we're going to enslave them. Some said we're going to keep them. We're not going to enslave them. But none of them said they're going to be citizens of this country. Not one of them. So the entire country was built upon the bedrock foundation of white supremacy, rooted in the ideology of racial hierarchy, the valuing and devaluing of humans by race. And this country decided it was going to be founded as a whites-only national citizenry, built on the bedrock foundation of racial hierarchy, valuing and devaluing humans by race. Now, that's how we started. By the time they got to the Civil War, still arguing over what to do with black people. That's what this country, that's what white people have been talking about from the inception of this country. So I always laugh when people say, why does everything have to be about race? Are you kidding me? You guys have been talking about race from the get-go. So at the end of the day, when you get to this end of the Civil War, the question comes up again. Now what are we going to do with all of these newly freed refugees? What are we going to do with all these black people? And the white radicals in Congress, white radicals, which is a subset of the congressional members in Congress at the time, the white radicals said, we're going to make them equal to us. That's a radical belief in white America, that black people are equal to white people and should be treated equally in all ways. And so they set about not trying to change the people, they set about trying to change the system, because they knew that they had inherited systems that were built upon human rights abuses. And so they funded the Freedmen's Bureau, food, clothing, shelter, workforce training, education. They created and funded the Freedmen's Bank. Frederick Douglass ended up becoming the president of the Freedmen's Savings and Trust. They changed the Constitution 3 times. They impeached a recalcitrant white supremacist president who opposed all of it. And by the way, he survived the trial and ended up later on getting reelected back to Congress. Keep that in mind. So his history should not repeat itself if we know it, but if we don't. Now, they did all of this within 7 years. They set the conditions. And because of the Homestead Act, every black family was promised 40 acres and a mule. Meanwhile, white families were getting on this Homestead Act as well. This is federal government giving away land to create an economic foundation. And black people were told that they would be included in that process. That did not happen. In fact, in 7 years, from 1865 to 1872, the white radicals were in charge of Congress. But by 1872, with the Amnesty Act, white supremacists got back into Congress. By 1877, they had the Great Compromise. They pulled the troops out of the South. And by the time that the Supreme Court had its big decision in 1896 that said we are two separate and distinct Americas, one black, poor and powerless, one white, wealthy and powerful, by the time that ruling came down, that officially said this nation is going to sustain its systemic human rights abuses. By the time that was ruled by the Supreme Court, more than 53,000 black people had lost their lives due to white terrorism. And so from that point forward, 100 years of white terrorism, where they were systematically destroying black communities and systematically tearing down all the infrastructures that black people had built. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background on what happened when the 7 years created the conditions for prosperity. Black people built 200 towns in the first 20 years after the emancipation process, after Juneteenth. Within 20 years, they built 200 towns, not just communities, whole towns. They built, for the next 100 years, they built more than 100 HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, because where was the battlefront of the new Civil War? It was in education. They did not want to educate our children. How evil do you have to be to not want to educate children? So again, I'm not saying that people are evil today. I'm saying a majority of them are ignorant of their own history of hostility. And you're talking about 100 years of white terrorism. We're talking white riots. We're talking about a public and private collective engagement targeting Black people, targeting our lives, policing abuse, targeting our access to capital, targeting our homes and where we can live, redlining and all these various different urban policy practices, racial covenants, saying you can't live here, you must live over there. They raised our communities, building freeways through them. We're way past slavery now. Mm-hmm. By the time we get to 1963, when Dr. King said, 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. And he goes on and on with this refrain of 100 years later. And he says, so today we've come to dramatize a shameful condition. That's his I Have a Dream speech. But he didn't start with his dream. He started with his reality. White folks just want to talk about the dream. No, he talked about his reality. And at the end of the day, he said that we are still at the bottom of the economic ladder. That's what Dr. King said in his book, Why We Can't Wait, that should be read in every school, is not, but should be, Why We Can't Wait. And he also started the book with chapter 1, The Negro Revolution. Why 1963? White people not talk about the Negro Revolution. The Negro Revolution had 3 objectives. 1, end segregation in school. 2, end segregation and discrimination in housing. And 3, end segregation and discrimination in banking and access to capital. All 3 of those have measurable impact. Today, segregation in schools is as it was in the 1960s. Housing discrimination, the Black people have the lowest home ownership rate of all the major racial demographics. And our home ownership rate today is where it was in the 1960s. And for banking, in the last 10 years, the banks have been fined $243 billion. That's with a B. $243 billion for ongoing discriminatory practices that Dr. King was decrying back in 1963. Come on. Let's be real about the systemic human rights abuses that are still going on today. We inherited this. Now, I'm not blaming anybody today for all of these things that are systemic in our society that they cannot recognize because they have been conditioned in an isolated bubble of ignorance. But if they are pointed to these systemic abuses, if they are pointed to these systems that benefit them, the status quo, if you will, they are beneficiaries of the status quo, then they have to make a decision. Do we want to change this or not? So we're all on the same page if we want to change it. But in order to change, you have to have an understanding of truth. You have to have an understanding that we must reconcile with the past, and that reconciliation necessarily is through reparations. So what does reparations look like? What should it look like? Well, I'm going to tell you. I can start giving you some solutions if we can all get on the solutions bandwagon and start working on this together. I can start adding to that, and I can give you some on this call today. But we have to get past the mindset that more than 70% of white America are against the idea of reparations. And I think that's due to ignorance.
We're talking with Mike Green, brilliant economist, National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness. We're talking about reparations, what they look like. Do Black people deserve reparations? I want to know what you think. Did you know that Black people are at the cornerstone of the building of the United States of America, at the cornerstone of the building of this Western world? Indeed, they found that just since 1960, from 1960 to today, the global South, that is, these nations of color, Africa, India, they have built the wealth of the West, of the European nations, by $152 trillion at least. So we're going to get a response from you, Robert Bertillo, and you, Jonathan Jackson, about what you've just heard. And where do we go from here, everybody? Let me go very quickly before we go to break. Daniel from Manchester, New Hampshire. Daniel, You got about a minute and a half. What's on your mind today?
Hey, so I don't give us white folks too much of a break by saying it's ignorant. I agree that probably 30% or less of white folks think that reparations is necessary and well-deserved. And honestly, the least we can do. I remember when you were talking about the Tulsa anniversary, you said your brother asked somebody who realized that, like, he's living on stolen land. That's a legitimate question. You know, you realize you're living on stolen land. Are you willing to give it back? Now, you're probably going to be hard-pressed to find anybody who's willing to do that, but reparations is the least we can do. But again, it's not, at this point, it's not ignorance because for lack of teaching. You know, we may not know about Tulsa.
1 minute.
Know about the 40 or so other massacres that have happened, you know, at the hands of white people against black people. But, like, we all know about slavery. We all know about the Trail of Tears. We all know about the destruction and the death being the foundation of this country. And I talk with liberals or Democrats about this issue, and they're like, oh, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Well, yeah, it's bad. It doesn't make us look good. It's really our history. You know, and putting your head in the sand, that's willful ignorance. That's not lack of teaching.
Willful
you know,
ignorance.
you don't have to know. Yeah. The word picnic. Yeah, you don't have to know the origin of the word picnic to realize, like,
10.
Yeah, we built this country on the backs of people that we, at the very least,
5.
And even worse, murdered.
Stay right
killed,
there.
We enslaved.
What should reparations look like? Do black people deserve them? More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Daniel, I wanted you to finish what you were saying before I have to let you go, sweetie.
What should reparations look like? That I should leave that to smarter people than me.
No. We're all part of this American project. What should reparations look like in your opinion?
Well, I mean, if we promised slaves or enslaved people 40 acres and a mule, what would that be worth today? You know, that's a hard one for me. I mean,
land,
if we can give,
a bank. They came up with a whole program to enfranchise black people, including giving us on paper the right to vote. It's just white people obstructed that, and they're still obstructing. Yeah. They're still obstructing, and so we have to look at that. That's why we're here today. And so I want to thank you for listening up there in Manchester, New Hampshire. Thank you, my sweet. Is there anything else you'd like to say before you go?
I'm sorry, address that to me?
Yes, of course.
No, I would say if we can give Bezos, you know, no taxes and Trump no taxes for 20 years, I think we could at least offer that as far as, you know, education and healthcare and, you know, tax cuts. I mean, that's a bare minimum. Like, I think that could be done by executive orders. I don't know why that's not being done.
Okay.
But again, like I said, I'll leave the details to smarter people than me.
Well, no. I mean, there's some other people who might be more studied, but they're not smarter than you. I want to thank you for listening and thinking. Listening and thinking, because, you know, we're all part of this. And that's why it's important to hear your voice.
I appreciate it.
Okay? I appreciate you.
Thank you, man.
Wow. Jonathan and Robert Patillo, we're going to be up in a couple of minutes. Well, 1 minute, actually. Wow. Mike Green, you gave us I asked you to set the table. Wow. How many courses? I love it.
And Santita, I'm so glad that Mike agreed to come on my show on Sunday, even though I haven't asked him yet.
You were going Oh, wait a minute. And, you know, hold on. I'm going to have to get him on Reverend Show on Sunday, too. How about that? Well, actually, no, not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. But yeah. It's important. You know, it's important, Jonathan.
right here.
I knew you were in for a treat. So, okay, so I'm going to come right to you, Jonathan. I know you're out and about today, but I know you wanted to participate, and I'm glad that you have. But thank you all so much. Now, Richard, you say reparations divides the working class people from uniting and give more people a better life. I don't. It's not divisive. You know, we give reparations all over the place. We do that. In fact, we gave European immigrants reparations for what they had experienced in Europe by giving them land, right? So that's what we do. But you need to repair and restore if we're going to move forward. So, Richard, why don't you think about calling in? I'd love for you to do that. 773 763 9278. 773 763 9278. Want to hear your voices today, but I'm going to come to Jonathan Jackson and to Robert Patillo, who's already going to have you on his show. Well, okay. At least it'll be later because he is out west. So, but Robert is a great show. Oh, hold on, we're coming up, everybody.
5. This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Determined, unstoppable, achieving the impossible. We're standing tall with our heads held high. We are victorious.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Jackson Show. Boy, oh boy, talk about setting the table. How many courses did he set? Mike Green, economist, National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness, attorney Robert Patillo, a civil rights attorney, brilliant civil rights attorney, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, host of his own radio show. He's already grabbed Mike Green to be on his show this Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time on the iconic WAOK radio station out of Atlanta, Georgia. Jonathan Jackson, national spokesman for Rainbow Push. You've also been an economics and business professor. What do you think of what you've just heard, and what about reparations? I mean, there's such resistance to it, Jonathan.
Well, Professor, I can't thank you enough for that foundation, that brilliant and analysis and synopsis of our history. You see, I find it very interesting. Business is rooted in the law, it's in the rules, it's in the regulations. Then off the balance sheet, it's the norms and the mores, the customs that continue to go forward. And if you think about the then and now, I'd like to probably take the other approach and go forward looking back. The overcharging of poor persons in the banking system today is part of the vestige and lineage of slavery, overcharging the people. When the professor talked about the penalties that the banks have paid, that's an asymmetric trade. Their crimes is worth the punishment. In one day, in 1 year, when the banks were going bankrupt because of their own fraudulent practices during what was called the credit crisis, which I strongly disagree with the term, it wasn't a crisis, something that was unpredicted, unforeseen. It was misalignment because the system was set up crooked. People were overcharged. Had black folks with the same credit, with the same amount of capital, been given the same loans, they would have had the same ability to recover. Subprime did not lead the economy down the tubes and over a cliff in 2008. It was Alt A and Alt B paper that was being given to white people with that was 100% loan to value and non-recourse. It wasn't the blacks. They were making the most money off the blacks. They were overcharging them. We saw that language come out in the Federal Reserve paper, the Red Book, in 1993, subprime. What kind of sense does that make? You pay more for less. You pay more money for less money. Come on, give me a break. Like, if you go shopping, that doesn't make sense. But that's how the financial system is set up. And right now, when the banks got $13 trillion from the Treasury, from the White House, from the Congress, from the Federal Reserve, $13 trillion was pumped into our financial system because nobody wanted to lend to U.S. banks. And in turn, they were rewarded to be able to keep their stewardship of our financial institutions. And in return, they kept overcharging the American people. And now you've got behemoth financial institutions of BlackRock and Blackstone that are buying enormous amounts of blocks of houses and making our country a nation of renters as opposed to homeowners. So it's fundamentally broken. And I think the professor was spot on. We have to go back and get the history right. When we get the history right, we have the truth. Facts can shape opinions, but opinions should not alter facts. We have an inability to just recognize Black excellence. And until we deal with this at the heart of it, white supremacy, we have to. And what does white supremacy look like today? I voted for Obama. Well, that's not good enough. Colin Powell could be my neighbor. Oh, well, you see, I'm not racist and discriminatory. It's all the jeering and picking at Black athletes. These are grown men. Think about, Santita, when you look at these basketball games, how many white men have a nickname? And they try to give every other Black man that's a professional athlete. A professional athlete, he's not a player. He's a professional sportsman. They want to give him a nickname. That's a way of denigrating these men. So we have to look for our respect. We have to go forward on your specific question on what does reparations look like. Santita, I'm not so much cash driven, although it's very necessary. If you have to get the institutions right, if we stop getting overcharged like bloodsuckers, we can naturally evolve. The things that are in the system that naturally keep taking us out, we have to confront. Being overcharged for insurance, being overcharged for capital, being denied access to capital, being over-policed and underprotected. When you talk about someone was wrongfully convicted, no, you throw off a family, you throw off a generation, you terrorize a part of a community. We have to stop those institutions from crumbling the human spirit.
Robert Patillo. Reparations, do we need them? Do we deserve them? What should they look like?
Well, I don't think that the need and deserve conversation is one that America's ready for, because there's no rational argument against reparations. It's just contract law. The analogy that I use is, imagine you have a grandparent who worked for the U.S. government during World War II, let's say, and they got poisoned with asbestos in a shipyard and they died. Well, now there's a debt owed by the United States government for that wrongful death. And then if your parents don't collect on that because it was held up in the court system and they die, well, then now you collect on that because it's a debt owed by the United States government. As long as there is a still existing defendant in the case, the tortfeasor, and as long as there's a cognizable class who is an heir to that amount owed, well, then you have a live case. So and if you can do it for World War II asbestos cases, as they're still going on today, there are people collecting right now for those sorts of cases, then legally there's no reason that we cannot collect for the debts owed in 1865 to our ancestors for what they went through. And let's understand, reparations is about humanity. It's about giving value to those people's lives. So if you say that Black folks are not owed reparations, what you're essentially saying is that the lives of those people who lived through the Middle Passage, who were worked from cradle to grave, who died, who were raped, and in some cases eaten by those slave owners, that their lives had absolutely no value. That's what you're saying if you make the argument that no debt is owed to their descendants. So there is no rational argument against reparations to be had. Indeed, I think it was March 11th, 1867, Thaddeus Stevens, a Republican representative from the state of Vermont, passed House Resolution 29, which guaranteed reparations to African Americans. In his legislation, it was $50 and 40 acres of land to be confiscated from the former Confederate territories and from Confederate estates to be distributed, and also military protection. A commission was to be set up by the Secretary of War at the time. This passed the House of Representatives and just got held up because we hadn't gotten rid of Andrew Jackson yet, or else it would have become the law of the land. Black folks were, even with the failures of House Resolution 29, we still had a form. We were moving in the direction of reparations reparations through Reconstruction until it was prematurely ended as a result of the Hayes-Tilden Compromise in 1876 and the Posse Comitatus, which removed troops from the South, allowing the rise of the Klan, the rise of Jim Crow. If Reconstruction had lasted 50 years, as it was originally intended to, then we more than likely would not be in the position we are in right now. So, of course, it is owed. Of course, it is deserved. And on the question of how it is done, we have to look at how it's been done in other situations. How have other people who've been removed from their lands, enslaved, been repatriated and repaid and repaired for the damage done to them? An example of reparations is Israel. Israel is Jewish reparations. You're repaying those people for all the sins done to them in Europe by giving them an entire country. And you give them an entire country, and you give them military protection, you give them corporate benefits, you give them unlimited international aid to ensure that they are safe from the people around them, and you protect them, and you allow them to rise and prosper on their own. So so the Jewish community went from being in the dregs of Europe 100 years ago to one of the most advanced countries in the Middle East right now. The former Yugoslavia is reparations for the Slavic people. Many people think the word slave comes from Slavic because for thousands of years, Slavic peoples were kidnapped from Eastern Europe and enslaved throughout Europe. And in order to repair that, the great powers of Europe came together and gave them Yugoslavia, an entire country, which later broke down into Serbia and Montenegro, the Balkans, Kosovo, etc. So when you're seeing how other people have been given reparations, it's not really that magical to figure out how to give black folks reparations. You do the same thing you did in Israel. You do the same thing you did in Yugoslavia. You give them land, and you give them self-determination. You give them protection. You give them an economic basis to build upon. And it's very similar to the plan that was going to be enacted if Reconstruction had continued. Now, my ideal version of that would be, I call it the Andalusian Reconquista. Give us all the land that used to be Andalus, Cordoba, and all those places, and just leave us alone for a little while. I think we can make it work. But in lieu of that, we figure out what the monetary value of that would be today. And that's the point of the John Conyers and now Sheila Jackson Lee's legislation, to set up a commission to study how it can be done and study how we can create it, because it is doable. We've seen it done before. We've seen it done recently around the world, but it just is going to take the political will and the education necessary for people to understand what is owed and how it needs to be paid back.
Mike Green, National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness. How 90% of black farmlands have been lost. I mean, and we can just keep Tulsa, that district, the Gap district, lost, and on and on and on and on. I mean, and now Tulsa is being gentrified. My brother Jonathan and I were just down there with our father. I mean, they are very gently, not so gently, moving the black people out of there. Where do we go from here?
Well, I love the invocation of Thaddeus Stevens into this argument. He ended up moving to Lancaster, and the National Institute for Inclusive Competitiveness is headquartered out of Philadelphia. So, radical thought is inherent in that region, and I am loving the question: where do we go from here? Dr. King's last book. Chaos or community? Well, here's what we have to take stock of, and your guests are hitting it out of the park. We have to, first of all, this notion that reparations for Black American descendants of slaves has all this resistance. They have a whole list of impediments for them to be for white people to be able to accept this idea. These arguments are disingenuous on their face, and your guest was actually knocking them down one after another. Dr. William Darity and his wife Kirsten Mullen wrote "From Here to Equality: Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century." That book is mandatory reading. The Rolling Stone magazine just published an op-ed by Dr. William Darity and Kirsten Mullen, And they take each one of these 10 objections to reparations and they knock them down one by one. So there really is no real legitimate objection to reparations. We just have to understand that that's a disingenuous position established primarily by white supremacists who want to sustain the status quo. So they are my enemy. I'm not going to look for them for answers. They're not on the solutions bus. But this idea of H.R. 40, which was, asking Congress to fund a commission to study reparations. Well, I like the fact that we should have Congress put money in the game to create some sort of commission to study this issue. I'm not sure H.R. 40 goes as far as I would like to see it go, but I like the idea of the federal funding of a national commission that studies this issue. Now, that being said, we already have existing infrastructure that can be leveraged for this study. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't even have to wait on Congress because we're not talking about a lot of money here. But we're talking about getting the federal government in the game because the federal government is culpable, but so are the states and so are the cities. And right now, we have an infrastructure of education. It's called the Historically Black Colleges and Universities, HBCUs. The HBCUs, more than 100 of them, exist. They have been underfunded, undervalued, underutilized. The education sector is essential to addressing this issue, and the descendants of slaves in this country should never have to pay a dime for education, period, cut and dry. The HBCUs should be funded to the tune of $1 billion a year, every single one of them. They should have $1 billion endowment, at least. That's only $100 billion. Again, the banks paid more than that, more than double that, just in fines, discriminating against black folks. So that's just an idea to underscore and invest in the existing infrastructure to increase the capacity to improve the productivity of black people in this country. Now, that being said, all 2.6 million black-owned businesses produce less than 1% GDP. If you have a $22 trillion GDP and you're the richest nation in the world, and 2.6 million of your black businesses produce less than 1% GDP, and less than 1% GDP is what we were producing when we walked off the plantations, then you know you have an infrastructure of entrepreneurship, an infrastructure of businesses, an infrastructure of employers. Black employers are 2% of the total employer landscape that you can increase to create jobs, to create generational wealth, to create ownership. Ownership is the reason why those Europeans came here, to take this land and own it, to control the resources. Well, ownership of land and resources, ownership of homes, that should be there should be a strategic plan for prioritizing black ownership, equitable ownership of the American dream of prosperity in this country. There is no plan, period. Now, that being said, there are plans for white ownership and fostering the conditions for white prosperity. There are more than 600 of those plans across the nation. They're called Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies plans. You go to any place in this country, you go to Tulsa, they got a SEDS plan, Comprehensive Economic Development Strategies plan. You sit right there in Chicago, Cook County has a SEDS plan. I'm looking at it on my computer right now, 2021 through 2025. So these plans that exist were funded by the federal government. And they bring together the stakeholders in every region to plan, it's an 18-month process, to plan the next 5 years of how they're going to establish the conditions for white prosperity, how they're going to invest in it, and public-private investors and every single data point you can think of, from education to entrepreneurship to industry growth to housing to transportation, all of that's in these plans. So when you see gentrification, don't think that that's the natural evolution of the market. No, that's planned. And so they are continuing to sustain these systemic human rights abuses that I talked about from the very beginning through planning. By the way, the EDA was established in 1965, right when they were establishing the Voting Rights Act. And Congress funded the EDA specifically to create the strategic economic planning so that the conditions prioritizing the most distressed communities in this country would be changed. Again, EDA was set up to establish better conditions for improving distressed communities, targeting Black communities. That was supposed to be the priority. Somehow or another, it got flipped. White communities became the priority, and now to this day, they have economic development districts, regional development organizations. They all produce comprehensive economic development strategies plans, and they foster the conditions for prosperity for white Americans in this country that continues to exacerbate the wealth gap. Now, all we got to do is use that same infrastructure and flip the priority. And now you've got a way to start talking about reparations and creating the plans and fostering the conditions for reparations, whether it be direct payments, which should be part of it, whether it be ensuring that all the schools serving poor Black communities in this country are the best schools and not the worst schools, because right now, Black children are ubiquitously served by the absolute worst quality schools in the world's richest nation. That is a travesty. That is a human rights abuse. And we should be flipping that. But if we're not going to use the existing infrastructure, we're going to have to create something new, and that's going to be problematic. So I advocate for using the existing infrastructure of HBCUs, the existing infrastructure of the EDA and SEDS plans, the existing infrastructure on the ground level at every city in every region that leads right up to the state and federal government.
Jonathan Jackson and Robert Patillo, I only have about 4 minutes left in the segment. Jonathan, 2 minutes. You, Robert Patillo, 2 minutes. Jonathan? Ooh, Jonathan, you still there? Well, let me go to you, Robert Patillo.
I love everything that you said, and I think that all we lack right now is political will when it comes to this discussion on reparations. What we see in America is that white people get very upset whenever they hear the idea of somebody getting something that they don't get to have first. That is the concept of white supremacy in a nutshell, that yes, you can have something, but only after we get the first dibs on it. We don't talk about the reason you have Oklahoma Sooners is that they literally went to a state. If however much land you can walk off in a day, you can have. And the people who are called the Sooners just got their Sooners than everybody else and took more. If you think about what the wealth would be in America right now if Black folks had access to that, to just walk off however much land they wanted and build an industry from that. If you look at the millionaires and billionaires of today, many of those fortunes were built prior to the Civil War. If you look at the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and so on and so forth, and their children are still cable news anchors right now because of the money that was developed in that period of time that we had no access to. So when we're talking about repairing the nation, you cannot look at the conditions of Black America today and not draw it directly to the failures of Reconstruction 150 years ago. And so we have the political will to repair that. We can fix that right now. The simplest thing to do would be just to say, there's 40 million Black people in the country. The population of the Southeast, of that being Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi, is about 40 million. We're just going to give y'all that and set up an economy, and y'all just go down there and y'all hold it down, and we'll move everybody else out to the mountain west where there's not a lot of people in Wyoming and North Dakota, and we'll call it even. But America is never going to do that. So we have to sit down and have these hard conversations about what is owed and how to fix and how to repair and rebuild. And I think America is nearly to that point where we can start having that conversation.
Mike Green, 1 minute. It belongs to you. I mean, the infrastructure is in place for success. I mean, white people live on it every
We
day.
don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
We do not have to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has already been invented. It's been applied to white people specifically and their descendants. But keep in mind, white people get up in arms when you start talking about white supremacy, when you start talking about reparations for the wrongs of their ancestors. But here's the problem. They don't understand that the systemic human rights abuses and the systems of segregationist policies and practices that their ancestors established were passed down each generation to each generation, and they are beneficiaries of the status quo. So the only thing that they need to do in order to continue to pass down these, the status quo, generational wealth gaps, the status quo ownership of America, is to do nothing.
Well,
And
stay
so
right there.
the more that they can stretch this out, the worse it is for us.
Mike Green, I'm going to give Jonathan this final, literally 60 seconds. Jonathan, you go. Glad we got you back.
Santita, I feel like I've been robbed. I missed the last 5 minutes. I couldn't get through, but I appreciate you so much. But, you know, it starts with the education, the enlightenment. When I know people that have gone to Harvard, that have studied and gotten PhDs,
1 minute.
Theology, and don't know the name Dr. W.B. Du Bois, there's a problem. So it's missing from their curriculum to teach true history. We're back, unfortunately, to the beginning of African-American history to try to make American history whole with this propaganda. Many people that have gone to fine institutions have been giving substandard education. And I agree with what the callers just said and your panelists. This will
30.
This blindfulness. Yes, they're the beneficiaries of it. We have to bring this to light. And I hope that we continue to go forward to talk about the modern day segregationists, the modern day people, the spiritual
15
of these arch segregationists and racists.
Jonathan.
10.
No, we're going to go just on the other side on Facebook Live. Stay right there. Stay right there. Stay right there. Facebook Live, stay right there, everybody. We're going to get some closing thoughts from everybody here. Tomorrow, the Santita Jackson Show, can't wait to be with you. But stay right here. The conversation has gotten real interesting about reparations. I love you, everybody. Have a great day. Stay here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Jonathan, please go on. I'm sorry, I had a hard out.
Oh, please. Thank you, Santita. You know, that we have to make the connection between, if you will, the missing link then and now. I think that's the gap that we have to close. That's why I was so interested in Tulsa. Tulsa, to me, like really brought it all together, the missing link. Tulsa is not history. Tulsa is an open case of a murder. We have a murder witness, a witness to murders, a woman that was 7 years old, a child who was 7 years old, that God has let now to live to be 107. The state of Oklahoma is only 7 years older than Miss Fletcher. That was never investigated as a murder scene then nor now. This has happened repeatedly across the country. And to the great abolitionists of Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner, they were fighting for equal protection under the law. We've not seen it, and the way we don't receive it is by ignoring us. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. It's simply just ignoring it, doing nothing about it. I am excited for this conversation, excited for this period in history, and there's so many scholars that are coming forward. You know, Santita, I'm sorry, I'm going to digress on this last 2 points. I go bike riding, and the name of our biking group is Major Taylor. Who knew that one of the greatest cyclists and the man that was known as the fastest person on earth was an African-American born in Indianapolis? It really came to light one day when I saw so many French bicyclists coming out with it, and I asked them how did they learn about the Major Taylor biking. They said, oh, Major Taylor's a very famous guy in France. He was the fastest human being on a bicycle for like many years in his career. And this has happened right here in Indianapolis, right in New York City, and our people don't even know it. So to the degree that whites in America are being shortchanged, it's embarrassing to them that they don't know their own history, because we're not necessarily viewed that way around the world. They look really sub-educated, if you ask me. So I'm honored. Thank you, Santita. And Professor and Brother Patillo, keep up the great work. I mean, you all give me hope, honestly. I see stronger voices and and the fight sometimes might get weary. I know that there's more soldiers coming, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Well, I mean, you all, that's why I wanted the three of you on this conversation today, because you have so much information. You all have platforms. And I want to use this platform to amplify your voices because, I mean, Robert Patillo, you should know Mike Green and your audience should know him too. And he should be talking to them. Jonathan, he should be on the Rainbow Push platform and on and on and on and on because we're the ones who have to tell our own story. That's why I miss Ebony and Jet so desperately. Lerone Bennett, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. John Johnson had the foresight, the insight to hire an historian, Mike Green, to tell the story, to tell our story. That was central. That was central to who he was. Robert Johnson, who they were all classmates with Dr. King from Morehouse. Robert Johnson was the only journalist that Michael Jackson spoke to freely, because he knew he was going to get a fair hearing. We have to tell our own story. And thank you for setting the table, Mike Green, by giving us the history and helping us to understand that the infrastructure is already here. Just like, that was already in the Constitution. Now, people obstructed it, but it's there. So where do we go from here? Chaos or community? I have to get out of here in about 8 minutes because they need the studio.
Well, I appreciate what you're doing, Santita.
Oh, you're very
This is phenomenal. Having these conversations and having them in a way that brings the history, brings the facts to the forefront. This is an educational platform, and whatever can be done to amplify what you're doing must be done.
Thank you for that. That means so much coming from you. Robert Patillo, your closing thoughts as you take Mike Green and introduce him to your audience on Sunday? I'm glad you're going to do it.
I'm so glad that Mike has agreed to come on my show Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, even without me asking him. Because it's such an important conversation that we have to have. And this idea that somehow taking property away from some Americans to give it to other people because of what has been done in the past, that is somehow untenable. I think that's ahistorical. America was built on the concept of just taking people's land and giving it to other people. That's literally how America became a country. So when we talk about reparations, we have to put in the proper historical context. We have to put in the proper modern context, and we have to look at some of the things that have been attempted before. The reason that Monrovia and Liberia failed was because we were essentially taking land from one group of colonized people and giving it to another group of colonized people, and then encouraging the new group of colonized people to colonize the other colonized people. So we know what doesn't work. We know what does work. We can do it. We just need the political will and the ideology to do so. Like I said, they just give us Ella Andalus back. I think we'll all be happy, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. So we're going to continue this conversation on Sunday with Mike.
Absolutely. Just think about the absurdity of Haiti paying France reparations, Mike Green. I mean, huh? The Northern Irish are paying reparations to the Crown. I mean, this is like, what? This is crazy. Mike Green, your final thoughts.
We're all suffering from a disease of white supremacist ideology. And we need to cure ourselves of this disease. Our minds have been conditioned. The minds of the vast majority of white America have been conditioned, and so we continue to see a maintaining of the status quo. And Dr. King called segregationists those who maintain the status quo. And one of your guests also said that the only thing that they need in order to sustain the status quo is do nothing, because they inherited all the privilege. They inherited the ownership. 98% of all the lands in this country are owned by whites. 80% of all the teachers in education sector are white. 80% of all the journalists are white. 80% of all the employers are white. 80% of all the elected politicians in this country are white. It is up to them to actually take hold of this conversation and establish a desire within white America to not just join this conversation, not just be a part of this conversation, but to lead this conversation, just as Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner did in Congress back in 1865 to 1872. Now, that being said, I just want to say one little silver lining that's happened. The HBCU Partners Act in January of this year, the HBCU Partners Act was passed by Congress and signed into law. And that law mandates all 32 federal agencies to every year submit to Congress their strategies, their tactics, their goals for investing in increasing the capacity of the HBCU competitiveness. They have to produce an HBCU competitiveness strategy, all 32 federal agencies. Imagine if we had a reparations act where every state had to submit its strategic plan for improving the productivity and generational outcomes of Black American descendants of slaves. What if we could do that? Follow that kind of pattern.
And we could. The will is missing, but we're the ones who have to make it so. You know, at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to yield the studio at this time. We're the ones who have to make this change. No one gave freedom to us. We had to fight for it ourselves. Everything that we've gotten in this country, we've had to fight for. And the struggle continues. The fight continues. That's why we have to have these conversations with these brilliant minds who we've gathered here today so that you can get the information and so that we can feel empowered, because that's where the will for us comes from. That's why our leaders have been restorative figures, because we need restoration, not just monetary restoration. We need spiritual restoration. We need to know that we deserve. We need to know that we do not deserve to be here. We deserve to be someplace else, doing the right things for the right reasons. Robert Patillo, Jonathan Jackson, Mike Green, I want to thank you for being with us today. And we're going to continue this conversation, Mike Green. I know I got you up real early. I know you're up early anyway. I want to thank you for being, I want to thank you because you guys, he's out on the West Coast. He's out on the left coast. He's in Oregon. So he got up at 5 o'clock to be with us. But you see, he was ready. He was ready to go. And so I just can't wait to have you back, Mike Green. You have a home here on this
I
show.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Oh, blessings to
I
you.
look forward to more conversations, and I look forward to the conversation on Sunday.
Oh, well, and you know what? I'm going to exchange I'm going to connect you and Robert Patillo by text, and I'm going to connect you and Jonathan Jackson by text. It'll be just one big text, so you all can all speak to each other, okay?
Fantastic.
Because you all should know each other. You should. Jonathan, you there? You want to say anything? Anybody want to say anything before we go? I got like 2 minutes.
No, thank you. I look forward to following up, and let this be the first of many. And maybe we go on camera. I'd like to see you take this so we can push it out. Great information.
Well, you know what? I do my thing on Monday nights. What we'll do is I'll work with you, Jonathan, and Robert Patillo, and you, Mike Green, to do something in the evening, on one of these evenings, and we will go on camera and have long times, because I think it's something that we need to push out. We're the ones who have to make our own case.
Now was the time. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, quick question. The HBCU Act, was that signed by Biden or Trump?
That was actually signed into law by Trump, but it was pushed by Jonathan Holyfield, a former NFL football player who became the executive director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs. He helped push it through the interagency working group, which pushed it through Congress and got the president to sign it.
Well, remember, he brought the HBCU office back into the White House. President Trump did. Remember, it had been taken out of the White House.
Yes, that was actually Jonathan Holyfield that actually pushed that.
Yeah. Well, he was open to it after all these students we lost. So, I mean, hey, you know, who does what? Just get it done, okay? This is not love. This is politics. This is about power and resources. Thank you, President Trump, for doing that. I'm glad about that because we lost a whole lot of students. 28,000 to 40,000 HBCU students never should have happened. Never should have happened. And it happened in a very, very short period of time. So we're going to talk about that and more. So I'm going to be in touch with all of you, but I'm going to send you all a text as soon as I get off the phone now. Get off the air now. I've got to release the studio. But Mike Green, Jonathan Jackson, Robert Patillo, I'm connecting you right now by text. I love you all. I love you, everybody. Please like and share this Facebook Live show. Pass it along. One love to you, John and Jewel and Janae and all of you. I love you, love you, love you. Mwah. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.